Marcus Sullivan slammed on his brakes, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips as he stared at what he thought was roadkill scattered across the Montana highway shoulder. The steam from his mug hung motionless in the frigid dawn air. It wasn't dead. It was breathing. The massive, tumor-covered face of a bear cub turned toward him, one clouded eye meeting his gaze with an intelligence that made his chest tighten. Jake Mitchell's radio crackled to life in the passenger seat, his voice sharp with panic. "Marcus, we've got 3 more abandoned animals found this morning. Something's happening out here." Marcus remembered the military dog Rex, bleeding out in his arms in Afghanistan, and how he'd whispered the same desperate promise he was about to make again. His hand trembled as he reached for the door handle, knowing Sarah would never forgive him for what he was about to do. "Dear God," he whispered, stepping into the cold. Who did this to you? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Marcus Sullivan had always believed that some wounds never heal. They just teach you how to carry the weight. At 38, he bore the invisible scars of 2 tours in Afghanistan, where he'd served as an Army veterinarian watching too many military animals die in his arms. The transition to civilian life had been brutal. $80,000 in medical school debt, a marriage hanging by threads, and nights spent driving Uber just to keep the lights on in their small cabin outside Glacier National Park. His wife Sarah, 6 months pregnant with their first child, had grown tired of competing with Marcus's compulsion to save every wounded creature that crossed his path. "You love broken things more than you love us," she'd whispered during their last fight, her hand protective over her swelling belly. The words hit harder because they weren't entirely wrong. Marcus knew he was trying to save the animals he couldn't save overseas, but knowing didn't make it easier to stop. The morning everything changed. Marcus was driving his usual route to the ranger station when fate intervened in the form of what looked like roadkill. But as he approached, the roadkill moved, revealing itself to be a bear cub with a tumor the size of a softball consuming half her face. Her remaining eye tracked his movement with startling intelligence, and when she weakly lifted her paw toward him, Marcus felt the familiar pull of a creature in desperate need. This was Luna, though he wouldn't know her name until later. At 18 months old, she should have been learning to fish and forage with her mother. Instead, she lay dying by a roadside, abandoned by whoever had been keeping her captive, evidenced by the crude collar marks around her neck and needle tracks on her legs. Someone had dumped her here to die, probably when the tumor made her too expensive to maintain. As Marcus knelt beside Luna, his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Doctor's appointment in 2 hours. Don't be late this time." He stared at the message, then at the dying cub, feeling the familiar weight of an impossible choice. Sarah needed him. Their unborn child needed him, but this creature would be dead in hours without intervention. That's when Eleanor Thompson appeared, emerging from the nearby Pine Ridge trailer park like a guardian angel in a faded housecoat. At 72, Ellie had buried her only son, Bobby, in Afghanistan. The same Bobby who had died saving Marcus's life in an IED explosion 3 years earlier. She'd been watching the ranger's truck from her kitchen window, remembering the young man her son had written about in his final letter. "Young man," Ellie called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen too much death to fear it anymore. "That's no place for a wild animal." But as she drew closer and recognized Marcus from the news coverage of Bobby's death, her expression softened. "You're him," she whispered. "You're the one my Bobby saved." Marcus looked up from Luna's labored breathing to find himself face to face with the woman whose son had died saving his life. Eleanor Thompson stood barely 5 feet tall, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, but her presence filled the space around them with quiet authority. The recognition hit them both simultaneously. She knew his face from the military funeral photos, and he remembered her from the worst day of his life. "Mrs. Thompson." Marcus said softly, his hand still resting on Luna's matted fur. "I never got to tell you." "Hush now," Ellie interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "Bobby wrote about you in his last letter. Said you had a good heart, maybe too good for your own good." She knelt beside the bear cub with surprising agility for her age, her experienced eyes taking in Luna's condition. "This little one's in a bad way. Tumor's infected, probably septic. She won't last the day without help." Marcus felt his phone buzzing again, Sarah calling. He declined the call, knowing it would cost him later, but unable to abandon Luna now. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "If I take her to the wildlife center, they'll just put her down. But I can't walk away from something that's dying," Ellie finished. "Bobby said the same thing about you. Said you once spent 3 days hand-feeding an injured falcon while your unit was under siege." She studied Luna's face carefully, her expression growing troubled. "This baby's been in captivity. See these marks? Someone's been keeping her penned up, and recently too." As if responding to their voices, Luna opened her good eye and looked directly at Marcus. The intelligence in that gaze was startling. Not the wild wariness of a feral animal, but something almost human in its depth of understanding. She made a soft, chuffing sound and weakly extended her paw toward him, palm up, like a dog asking for treats. "Lord have mercy," Ellie whispered. "She's been trained." Someone taught her that gesture. The implications hung heavy between them. Bears weren't pets. Keeping one was illegal and incredibly dangerous. Yet Luna's behavior suggested months, maybe years of human contact. Marcus's phone rang again. This time it was Sarah, and this time he answered. "Marcus? Where are you? We're supposed to be at Dr. Peterson's office in 30 minutes. "Sarah, I found something." "No." Her voice cut through his explanation like ice. "Whatever it is, no. We've been planning this appointment for weeks. We're finding out the baby's gender today, remember? The one thing you said was more important than anything else." Marcus looked down at Luna, who had somehow managed to drag herself closer to his leg, her breathing becoming more labored by the minute. "Sarah, there's a bear cub here that's going to die if I don't—" "A bear?" Sarah's voice rose an octave. "Marcus Sullivan, you step away from that animal right now." "You're not a military vet anymore. You're going to be a father. Start acting like it." "I can't just leave her here to die," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for what felt like an eternity. When Sarah finally spoke, her words were measured and cold. "Choose, Marcus. Right now. This bear or your family. Because I swear to God, if you miss this appointment for another one of your rescue missions, I'm done. The baby and I will be at my mother's when you finally decide to come home." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, feeling the familiar weight of an impossible choice settling on his shoulders. Ellie watched him with knowing eyes, her weathered hand gently stroking Luna's head. "Life's full of hard choices, honey," she said quietly. "But the hardest ones usually show us who we really are." She looked down at Luna, who was trying to lick Marcus's boot with a tongue that barely had the strength to move. "This little girl's been abandoned once already. Question is, can you live with yourself if you abandon her too?" Before Marcus could answer, a white van pulled up behind his truck. The logo on the side read, "Montana Wildlife Solutions," in professional lettering. A man in his 50s stepped out, wearing khakis and a confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He had the kind of polished appearance that screamed authority and expertise. "Gentlemen, ma'am," the man called out, approaching with his hand extended. "Dr. Richard Caldwell, wildlife veterinarian. Got a call about a sick bear cub. Don't worry, I'm here to help." Marcus felt a flicker of relief. Professional help meant Luna might actually survive. But Ellie's grip tightened on his arm, her fingernails digging into his skin hard enough to leave marks. When he looked at her, her face had gone pale, and she was staring at Dr. Caldwell with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Something's not right," she whispered so quietly only Marcus could hear. "That man's trouble. I can feel it in my bones." Dr. Richard Caldwell moved with the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. His khakis were pressed to perfection, his wildlife veterinarian credentials prominently displayed on a lanyard around his neck, and his van was equipped with state-of-the-art animal transport equipment. Everything about him screamed legitimate professional, except for the way Ellie Thompson was watching him like a hawk eyeing a snake. "Beautiful animal," Caldwell said, crouching beside Luna with what appeared to be genuine concern. "American black bear, approximately 18 months old. The facial tumor is quite advanced, probably been developing for months." He pulled on latex gloves and began examining Luna with gentle, expert hands. "Poor thing's been through hell. See these injection sites? Someone's been medicating her, probably trying to manage the pain." Marcus felt a surge of hope. Finally, someone who knew what they were doing, someone who could actually save Luna. "Can you help her? The tumor, is it operable?" "Absolutely," Caldwell replied without hesitation. "I run a specialized facility about an hour north of here. We've handled cases far more complex than this. The key is immediate intervention. Within the next few hours or we'll lose her." He stood, brushing dirt from his khakis. "I can have her in surgery by this afternoon." But Ellie wasn't buying it. She'd been studying Caldwell's van while he examined Luna, and something was bothering her. The vehicle was equipped more like a prison transport than a rescue unit. Heavy-duty locks, reinforced walls, and ventilation systems designed to contain rather than comfort. In her 72 years, she'd learned to trust her instincts, and every instinct was screaming danger. "Mighty convenient," Ellie said, her voice carrying the sharp edge of suspicion. "You showing up right when we needed you. Almost like you were expecting to find her here." Caldwell's smile never wavered, but Marcus caught a flash of something cold in his eyes. "I monitor emergency frequencies, ma'am. Wildlife emergencies require rapid response." He turned back to Marcus, effectively dismissing Ellie. "Time is critical here. Every minute we delay reduces her chances of survival." Marcus felt torn between relief and uncertainty. His phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. "Last chance, doctor's office, now." But how could he walk away from Luna when help had literally arrived? "What happens after the surgery?" he asked. "Recovery, rehabilitation, eventual release back to the wild," Caldwell replied smoothly. "Though with her history of human contact, she may need long-term management. Some animals are too damaged to ever truly return to their natural state." He gestured toward his van. "We should get her loaded up. I've got surgical facilities standing by." That's when Ellie noticed something that made her blood run cold. While Caldwell was talking, he'd casually injected Luna with something from a small syringe, not the obvious medical examination Marcus was watching, but a quick, practiced movement that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd sedated an animal without permission. "What did you just give her?" Ellie demanded, stepping between Caldwell and Luna. "Mild sedative," Caldwell replied, his patience wearing thin. "Standard protocol for transport, reduces stress and prevents injury." But Luna's response was anything but standard. Instead of simply growing drowsy, she began showing signs of distress, pawing at her mouth and whimpering. Marcus knelt beside Luna, alarm bells going off in his head. In Afghanistan, he'd seen animals react to various medications, and this wasn't normal sedation behavior. "What was in that injection?" "I don't appreciate having my professional judgment questioned," Caldwell said, his mask of friendliness finally slipping. This animal is critically ill and needs immediate veterinary intervention. Every minute you waste with these paranoid questions brings her closer to death." But Ellie had seen enough. During her years as an Army medic, she'd learned to spot the difference between legitimate medical professionals and people with their own agendas. "Marcus, look at his van. Really look at it. Those aren't rescue modifications, those are restraint systems." Marcus studied the vehicle more carefully and felt his stomach drop. Ellie was right. The interior was designed like a mobile prison with heavy-duty restraints and monitoring equipment that had nothing to do with animal welfare. "Dr. Caldwell, I think we need to reconsider." "There's nothing to reconsider," Caldwell interrupted, his voice hardening. "This animal is now under the jurisdiction of the Montana Wildlife Authority. I have legal authority to seize any dangerous wildlife found in public spaces." He pulled out official-looking papers from his jacket. "You can cooperate, or I can call law enforcement to assist." The documents looked legitimate, but something felt wrong. Marcus had enough experience with military bureaucracy to recognize when paperwork was being used as a weapon. "I'd like to verify these documents before—" "There's no time for verification," Caldwell snapped. "This animal is dying. Are you really going to let your paranoia kill her?" Luna, now heavily sedated but still conscious, made a soft sound that broke Marcus's heart. She was looking at him with her one good eye, and he could swear he saw pleading in that gaze, not just for help, but for protection. The same look Rex had given him in Afghanistan when the enemy was closing in. Ellie stepped closer to Marcus, her voice low and urgent. "Honey, I've seen enough wolves in sheep's clothing to spot another one. This man knows more about this bear than he's letting on. The injection sites, the way she's trained, the convenient timing, none of this is coincidence." Marcus felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. Sarah was probably already at the doctor's office, furious and heartbroken. His marriage was hanging by a thread, his financial situation was desperate, and now he was being asked to trust his instincts over apparent professional authority. But looking down at Luna, seeing the trust in her eyes despite everything she'd been through, he knew what Bobby Thompson would have done. "No," Marcus said quietly, then louder. "No. She stays with us until I can verify your credentials and your facility." Caldwell's facade finally cracked completely. "You're making a serious mistake, Mr. Sullivan. This animal is dangerous, and you're harboring it illegally. I'll be back with proper law enforcement, and when I am, you'll face criminal charges." He headed toward his van, then turned back. "Enjoy explaining to your wife why you chose a wild animal over your family's future." As Caldwell drove away, Marcus realized that Ellie was right. They were in deeper trouble than they'd imagined. The first thing Marcus did after Caldwell drove away was call Jake Mitchell, the only person he trusted completely in the Montana Ranger Service. Jake had served in the Marines before becoming a park ranger, and his instincts about people were usually dead on. When Marcus explained the situation, Jake's response was immediate and troubling. "Marcus, I never called any Dr. Caldwell," Jake said, his voice tight with concern. "I put out a general call for wildlife veterinarian assistance, but no one by that name responded. Whoever that guy is, he's not who he claims to be." Meanwhile, Ellie had been examining Luna more closely, using the medical skills she'd learned during her years as an Army medic. What she found made her stomach turn. "Marcus, come look at this," she called, her voice grim. "This baby's been declawed. Someone removed her claws surgically, all of them. Do you know what that means?" Marcus knelt beside them, horror washing over him as he saw the evidence. Declawing a bear was not only illegal but incredibly cruel, essentially crippling the animal's ability to climb, defend itself, or hunt naturally. "Someone was keeping her as a pet," he whispered. "A 1,500-pound pet." "Worse than that," Ellie said, pointing to other scars on Luna's body. "See these marks? Training scars. Someone's been using electric prods on her, probably teaching her to perform tricks or comply with commands. She looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes. This little girl's been tortured. As if understanding their conversation, Luna made a soft, whimpering sound and pressed closer to Marcus. Despite everything she'd endured, despite being dumped on a roadside to die, she still sought comfort from humans. The trust she showed was both heartbreaking and terrifying. What kind of hell had she escaped from? Marcus's phone rang. It was Sarah, and he knew he had to answer. "The doctor's appointment is over, Marcus," she said, her voice hollow with disappointment. "We were supposed to find out if we're having a son or daughter together. Instead, I found out alone. It's a boy, by the way, in case you were wondering." "Sarah, I'm sorry. No, you're not sorry. You're exactly where you want to be, with another broken animal that needs you more than your family does." Her voice cracked. "I can't do this anymore, Marcus. I can't compete with your need to save everything except our marriage." "This is different," Marcus said desperately. "This bear, she's been tortured, kept as some kind of illegal pet. There's a man pretending to be a veterinarian trying to take her, and I think she's in real danger." "There's always a reason," Sarah replied. "There's always some animal that needs you more than we do. I'm going to my mother's house." When you decide what's more important, your family or your mission to save the world, you know where to find us. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. In trying to save Luna, he might have lost everything else that mattered. Ellie, who had heard every word, placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes doing the right thing costs us everything we think we want," she said gently. "But it gives us everything we need to live with ourselves." Over the next several hours, as they researched Caldwell online using Ellie's ancient laptop, the scope of what they'd stumbled into became clear. Dr. Richard Caldwell existed, but the real Caldwell had died in a car accident 6 months earlier. Someone was using his identity, his credentials, and his reputation to operate what appeared to be a legitimate wildlife sanctuary. Jake arrived that evening with disturbing news from his own investigation. "I made some calls to other ranger stations," he reported. "There's been a pattern over the past year. Exotic animals found abandoned in remote locations, all showing signs of prior captivity. When this Dr. Caldwell shows up to collect them, they disappear. No follow-up reports, no documentation of their care or release." "What are you saying?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "I'm saying we might be looking at some kind of illegal exotic animal operation. Maybe breeding, maybe trafficking, maybe both." Jake pulled out a folder of photographs. "These are some of the animals that have disappeared into Caldwell's care. A lynx found near Billings, 2 wolf cubs discovered outside Great Falls, and a cougar cub that turned up near the Wyoming border, all showing signs of prior human contact, all collected by our mysterious veterinarian." Ellie studied the photos with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen too much suffering. "These babies were all being kept illegally, weren't they? Someone's running a black market exotic pet operation, and when the animals get sick or too big to handle, they dump them." "That's what I'm thinking," Jake confirmed. "And when they escape or get found, this fake Caldwell shows up to rescue them, probably to cover the tracks of whoever's running the operation." Marcus looked down at Luna, who was sleeping fitfully on a pile of blankets they'd arranged in his garage. Even in sleep, she seemed to be having nightmares, her legs twitching as if she was running from something. So Luna didn't just escape from some private collector. She escaped from something bigger. "Much bigger," Jake agreed. "And now they want her back, probably to eliminate evidence of what they've been doing to her." The next morning brought new complications. Marcus woke to find his driveway blocked by news vans and protesters. Word of the dangerous bear had spread through social media overnight, and the community was deeply divided. On one side stood veterans and animal rights activists who remembered Bobby Thompson's sacrifice and supported Marcus's decision to help Luna. On the other side were families with young children, led by his neighbor Janet Pearson, who saw Luna as a deadly threat to community safety. "That animal belongs in a zoo or a sanctuary, not in someone's garage," Janet shouted at the growing crowd. "What happens when it gets hungry? What happens when it decides our children look like dinner?" Counter-protesters, many wearing military caps and carrying signs reading "Honor Bobby's Memory" and "Animals Deserve Justice Too," faced off against Janet's group. The tension was palpable, and Marcus could see that Luna was becoming frightened by the noise and chaos outside. Ellie, who had spent the night on Marcus's couch to help care for Luna, watched the confrontation with the wisdom of someone who'd lived through decades of community conflicts. "Honey," she said to Marcus, "fear makes people do stupid things. And right now, half this town is scared of that little girl in your garage, and the other half is scared of what'll happen if they don't stand up for what's right." The situation escalated when local news crews arrived, turning Marcus's quiet street into a media circus. Reporter after reporter tried to get interviews, asking loaded questions about dangerous wild animals in residential areas and irresponsible wildlife management. Marcus found himself painted as either a hero or a dangerous fool, depending on which channel you watched. But the media attention brought unexpected consequences. By afternoon, Marcus had received a call from the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, informing him that his employment as a park ranger was being suspended pending investigation into his unauthorized handling of dangerous wildlife. The financial blow was devastating. Without his ranger salary, he had no way to keep up with the mortgage on the cabin or the payments on his truck. Sarah called that evening, her voice a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "I saw the news, Marcus. You're on television, holding that bear like it's a pet. Do you have any idea how this looks? How it feels to watch my husband on TV choosing an animal over his pregnant wife?" "I didn't choose anything," Marcus protested. "This just happened. I found her dying and—" "You chose," Sarah interrupted. "You've been choosing for months. Every late night driving Uber to pay for your rescue missions, every weekend spent rehabilitating some injured animal instead of preparing for our baby, every time you put someone else's need to be saved ahead of our need to be a family." Marcus wanted to argue, but deep down he knew she wasn't entirely wrong. His compulsion to save broken things had become a wall between them, and Luna was just the latest and biggest crack in their foundation. Ellie, who had been listening from the kitchen, approached with 2 cups of coffee and the kind of gentle wisdom that comes from a lifetime of hard choices. "You know, honey," she said, settling into the chair across from Marcus, "Bobby used to tell me about the animals you saved overseas. Dogs, cats, even a monkey once. He said you couldn't sleep at night knowing something was suffering when you could help." "Sarah thinks it's obsession," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe it is," Ellie agreed. "But obsession and calling are sometimes the same thing, just viewed from different angles. The question is, what are you being called to do? Save your marriage or save this little girl? Because right now, trying to do both might mean losing everything." As if summoned by their conversation, Luna woke from her nap and padded over to Marcus, her massive head resting against his leg. Despite her size and wild nature, she moved with the careful gentleness of an animal that had learned to be cautious around humans. When Marcus scratched behind her ears, she made a sound somewhere between a purr and a sigh, contentment mixed with exhaustion. "Look at her," Ellie whispered. "She trusts you completely. After everything she's been through, everything humans have done to her, she still believes you'll keep her safe. That's not something you walk away from." Marcus knew Ellie was right, but he also knew the cost of that trust was climbing every hour. His job was gone, His wife was leaving, and somewhere out there a dangerous man was planning to reclaim the animal Marcus had sworn to protect. 3 days after the media circus began, Marcus received a call that changed everything. It was Jake Mitchell, and his voice carried an urgency that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Marcus, you need to get Luna somewhere safe. Now. I've been digging deeper into this Caldwell character, and what I found is going to blow your mind." "What did you find?" Marcus asked, instinctively moving closer to Luna, who was resting in the corner of his garage. "The real Richard Caldwell didn't just die in a car accident 6 months ago," Jake said. "He was murdered. The accident was staged. And our fake Caldwell? His real name is Richard Emerson, and he's wanted in 3 states for running an exotic animal trafficking ring that generates millions of dollars annually." Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "Trafficking? You mean like selling them? Worse than that. These animals are bred and trained for private collectors who want exotic pets, but also for underground fighting rings, illegal hunting preserves, and even worse purposes I don't want to think about." Jake's voice was grim. "Luna wasn't just someone's pet, Marcus. She was inventory, and now she's escaped merchandise that can expose Emerson's entire operation." Ellie, who had been preparing Luna's afternoon meal, stopped what she was doing when she saw Marcus's expression. "What is it, honey?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. The voice that came through was smooth, confident, and terrifyingly calm. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Richard Emerson. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. "Luna doesn't belong to anyone. She's a wild animal." Emerson's laugh was cold. "Luna is her name, is it? How touching. You've grown attached." "That will make this conversation more interesting." There was a pause, then the sound of traffic in the background. "I'm going to make you an offer, Mr. Sullivan, one that I strongly suggest you accept." "I'm not interested in any offers from you." "Oh, but you will be. You see, I have something you value even more than that bear." The background noise on the call shifted, and Marcus heard a sound that made his blood freeze. A woman's voice, muffled but unmistakably Sarah's, calling his name in distress. "Sarah?" Marcus shouted into the phone, his voice echoing through the garage. Luna immediately responded to his distress, rising to her feet and moving protectively to his side. "Your wife is perfectly safe for now," Emerson said casually. "She was so easy to find, Mr. Sullivan. Predictable, really, going to her mother's house. Such a lovely neighborhood. Such trusting people who open their doors to delivery men without question." Marcus felt rage building in his chest like a physical force. "If you hurt her, I swear to God—" "You'll what? Call the police? With what evidence?" "I'm a respected wildlife veterinarian, remember? Your wife simply had a medical emergency, pregnancy complications, you understand. I was kind enough to offer my services as a good Samaritan." Emerson's voice took on a mocking tone. "The beauty of a good cover identity, Mr. Sullivan, is that everyone trusts you until it's too late." Ellie had been listening to Marcus's side of the conversation, and her face had gone pale. She grabbed a piece of paper and scribbled, "Keep him talking. Jake, trace the call." Marcus nodded and gestured for Jake to use his radio. "What do you want?" Marcus asked, forcing himself to keep his voice steady. "Simple exchange. The bear for your wife." "Midnight tonight at the old sawmill on Route 47. Come alone, bring the animal in a standard transport cage. I'll provide instructions on where to acquire one. Follow my directions exactly, and your wife will be released unharmed." "How do I know you won't kill us both?" "Because, Mr. Sullivan, I'm a businessman, not a monster. Killing you creates unnecessary complications. All I want is to recover my property and disappear. Your wife can't identify me. She never saw my face. You can't prove anything without evidence that will disappear with me. Everyone goes home happy." Marcus looked at Luna, who was watching him with those intelligent eyes, somehow sensing the gravity of the situation. "And if I refuse? Then your wife and unborn child will simply vanish. It happens, unfortunately. Pregnant women sometimes suffer complications, become confused, wander off. By the time anyone realizes something's wrong, it's far too late." Emerson's voice hardened. "Don't test me, Mr. Sullivan. I've made this offer because I prefer clean solutions, but I'm prepared for messy ones if necessary." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, feeling like he was drowning in an ocean of impossible choices. Save Luna and lose Sarah and his unborn child, or save his family and condemn Luna to whatever horrors awaited her in Emerson's operation. Jake had been working frantically on his radio while Marcus was on the call. "I got a partial trace," he reported. "Call originated from a cell tower near Whitefish, but it's moving. He's probably using a burner phone and staying mobile to avoid detection." Ellie sat down heavily in a folding chair, her face showing every one of her 72 years. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "This man's got your wife, and he wants Luna back. What are we going to do?" Marcus began pacing the garage, his mind racing through options that all seemed to lead to disaster. Luna followed him back and forth, her massive presence somehow comforting despite the chaos surrounding them. When he stopped pacing and leaned against his workbench, Luna gently nudged his hand with her nose, a gesture of comfort that broke his heart. "I can't give her back to him," Marcus said finally. "You saw what he did to her. The scars, the declawing, the way she flinches when she hears loud noises. She's been tortured, and if I give her back, it'll be worse. He'll probably kill her to eliminate evidence." "But Sarah and the baby," Ellie started. "I know!" Marcus exploded, then immediately felt guilty for raising his voice. "I know," he repeated more quietly. "My wife is pregnant with my child, and some psychopath has them because I couldn't walk away from a dying animal. What kind of man does that make me?" Jake studied the situation with the tactical mindset of a former Marine. "It makes you the kind of man Bobby Thompson died for," he said quietly. "Your friend didn't push you out of the way of that IED because he thought you were perfect. He did it because he believed you were worth saving, because you were the kind of person who couldn't abandon something that needed help." Luna made a soft sound and pressed closer to Marcus, as if she could sense his anguish. Despite her own trauma, despite everything she'd endured, she was trying to comfort him. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He'd been trying to save her, but in this moment, she was the one offering strength. "There has to be another way," Ellie said, her voice carrying the determination of someone who'd faced down loss before and refused to accept defeat. "This Emerson, he's a criminal. Criminals make mistakes. They get overconfident, they underestimate people, they forget that sometimes the smallest person in the room is the most dangerous." Jake was already thinking along the same lines. "The midnight meeting, it's obviously a trap. He's planning to take Luna and probably kill you both to eliminate witnesses. But maybe we can turn his trap against him." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "What do you mean?" "I mean we don't go in alone, and we don't go in unprepared. We've got 6 hours to plan, and I know some people who might be willing to help. Off the books, if you know what I mean." Ellie stood up with renewed energy. "And while you boys are planning your rescue mission, I'm going to make some calls of my own. Bobby had friends in the military, good men who remember what it means to have each other's backs. Some debts don't get paid with money. They get paid with action." As if understanding that something important was happening, Luna moved to the center of the garage and sat down, her massive form somehow radiating calm determination. She looked at each of them in turn, then settled her gaze on Marcus with an expression that seemed to say, "Whatever you're planning, I'm ready." Marcus knelt beside her and rested his hand on her head, feeling the solid warmth of her presence. "You've been through hell, girl," he whispered. "But we're not giving up on you. We're not giving up on any of us." In that moment, Marcus understood something fundamental about the choice he'd made on the roadside 3 days ago. It hadn't been about saving Luna, it had been about discovering who he really was when everything was on the line. And now, with his family's life hanging in the balance, he was about to find out if that discovery had been worth the cost. The plan they hatched was desperate, dangerous, and probably suicidal, but it was the only chance they had. Jake had called in favors from 3 former Marines who'd settled in Montana after their service, men who understood that some battles were worth fighting regardless of the odds. Ellie had contacted Bobby's old unit, and within 2 hours, Marcus found himself surrounded by more firepower and tactical expertise than he'd seen since Afghanistan. But as the sun began to set, and the time for the exchange approached, everything started falling apart. The first sign of trouble came when Marcus tried to start his truck and found the engine completely dead. Not just a dead battery, but professional sabotage. Someone had cut critical wires and drained all the fluids. Emerson wasn't taking any chances. "He's been watching us," Jake realized grimly. "Probably since this morning. He knows we're planning something." The second blow came when Marcus's phone rang at 8 p.m., 4 hours before the scheduled exchange. It was Emerson again, but this time his voice carried a cold fury that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Did you really think I was stupid enough to believe you'd come alone?" Emerson snarled. "I've been monitoring police frequencies, Mr. Sullivan. Very interesting conversations about off-the-books operations and tactical support. You've disappointed me." "Look, we can still—" Marcus began, but Emerson cut him off. "No, we can't. You had one simple instruction. Come alone with the bear. Instead, you're organizing some kind of military operation against me. That changes the dynamic considerably." There was a pause, and Marcus could hear muffled voices in the background. Sarah's voice, crying and pleading. "Your wife is going to pay for your stupidity." Marcus felt his world cracking apart. "Please, she's pregnant. She's innocent in all this. Take me instead." "Oh, you're still coming, Mr. Sullivan. But now the terms have changed. You have 1 hour to get to the sawmill, and you're bringing more than just the bear. You're bringing everyone who's been helping you. The old woman, the ranger, all of them. If anyone's missing, if I detect any backup or surveillance, your wife dies immediately." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in horror. He'd tried to save Sarah by bringing help, and instead he'd condemned everyone he cared about. Luna, sensing his distress, moved close and rested her massive head against his shoulder, a gesture of comfort that only made him feel worse. Ellie, who had heard every word, stood up with grim determination. "Well," she said quietly, "looks like we're all going to find out what we're really made of tonight." Jake was already calculating odds and options with military precision. "He's forcing us into a kill zone. The sawmill is isolated, multiple escape routes for him, limited cover for us. It's a perfect place for an ambush." He looked at the 3 Marines who'd volunteered to help. "I can't ask you boys to walk into that." But Tom Reeves, a grizzled former sergeant with arms covered in Marine tattoos, shook his head. "With respect, Jake, you're not asking. We're volunteering. Bobby Thompson saved Marcus's life, and Marcus is trying to save something that can't save itself. That's worth dying for, if it comes to that." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the loyalty of people who barely knew him, united by their connection to a man who died saving his life 3 years ago. But he also felt the crushing weight of responsibility for their safety. "I can't let you all risk your lives because of my choices," he said. "It's not your choice anymore," Ellie replied firmly. "That man has your pregnant wife, and he's threatened to kill innocent people." This stopped being about just you and Luna the moment he escalated to kidnapping. She picked up her purse and checked to make sure her late husband's service revolver was still inside. "Besides, honey, at my age, I don't have much left to lose except my self-respect." As they prepared to leave for what might be their final mission, Luna began exhibiting strange behavior. She kept walking to the garage door, then returning to Marcus, then going back to the door. When she started pawing at the ground and making soft whining sounds, Ellie realized what was happening. "She knows we're going somewhere dangerous," Ellie observed. "Look at her. She's trying to tell us something." Luna had begun tracing patterns in the dirt on the garage floor with her claw. At first it looked like random scratching, but then Marcus realized she was drawing numbers. 2, 3. The same numbers she'd been obsessively drawing since he'd found her. 23, Marcus said. "She's been doing this since day one." "What does 23 mean?" Jake studied the numbers, then pulled out his phone and started typing. "Route 23, he said after a moment. "It runs past the sawmill area, but there's also—" His face went pale. "Oh, God. 23 Elm Street. That's in Whitefish, about 5 miles from the sawmill." "So?" Marcus asked. "So, according to county records, that property was leased 6 months ago by a shell company called Montana Wildlife Solutions." Jake looked up from his phone. "Luna's not just drawing random numbers. She's trying to tell us where she came from, where Emerson's operation is based." The implications hit them all at once. Emerson had Sarah at the sawmill, but his real operation, the breeding facility, the evidence, possibly other victims, was at the Elm Street property. Luna had been drawing a map to her prison, trying to lead them to the evidence that could destroy Emerson's entire network. "We could split up," Tom suggested. "Some of us go to the sawmill to get Sarah, others hit the Elm Street facility to gather evidence and call in federal backup." But Marcus shook his head. He said, "Everyone who's been helping me has to be there, or Sarah dies. If he's watching and anyone's missing, he'll know." That's when Luna did something extraordinary. She walked to Marcus, gently took his sleeve in her teeth, and led him to his laptop computer. Using her nose, she nudged the laptop open and began pawing at the keyboard. It took several attempts, but she managed to pull up a video calling application. "She knows how to use a computer," Ellie whispered in amazement. "Someone taught her that." Marcus realized what Luna was trying to show them. She's not just drawing 23, she's trying to communicate with someone at that address. Someone who might still be there. With trembling fingers, Marcus typed in the address Luna had been drawing and searched for any associated phone numbers or online connections. What he found made his blood run cold. A dark web forum where exotic animal collectors bragged about their illegal purchases, complete with photos and videos of animals performing trained behaviors. And there, in a video posted 3 months ago, was Luna, younger, healthier, but unmistakably her, sitting in a cage while a young girl taught her to use simple computer commands. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, and the caption read, "Emma teaching our newest acquisition some basic tech skills. Amazing what these animals can learn when properly motivated." "Emma," Marcus breathed. Luna was trying to lead us to Emma. Jake was already on his radio calling in favors from federal contacts. If there are other victims at that facility, if there are kids involved, this becomes a federal case. FBI will have to respond. But time was running out. They had less than 30 minutes to get to the sawmill, and Marcus knew that showing up late would mean Sarah's death. As they loaded into Jake's truck, the only vehicle Emerson hadn't sabotaged, Luna made one final attempt to communicate. She walked to Marcus, placed her massive paw on his chest over his heart, then touched her own chest in the same spot. Then she pointed toward the direction of the Elm Street facility and made a sound Marcus had never heard before. Not quite a roar, not quite a whine, but something that sounded heartbreakingly like a plea. "She's telling us to choose," Ellie realized. "Save Sarah or save Emma and whoever else might be at that facility." Marcus looked into Luna's eyes and saw something that took his breath away. Luna wasn't asking him to save her. She was asking him to save the others, even if it meant sacrificing herself. After everything she'd endured, after all the torture and abandonment, she was still trying to protect other victims. In that moment, Marcus understood that the choice wasn't really about Luna or Sarah or even Emma. It was about what kind of man he was going to be when faced with an impossible situation. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he knew exactly what he had to do. The sawmill at midnight looked like something out of a nightmare. Ancient machinery cast twisted shadows in the moonlight, and the smell of decades-old sawdust mixed with something else, something that made Marcus's stomach turn. As they approached the main building, Luna began trembling, not from cold but from recognition. She knew this place, and whatever memories it held were bad ones. Emerson was waiting for them in the center of the mill floor, and Marcus's heart nearly stopped when he saw Sarah. She was tied to a chair about 20 feet away from Emerson, her face pale but defiant. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see that she was unharmed, but the sight of her pregnant belly and the duct tape across her mouth sent rage coursing through his veins. "Punctual," Emerson said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I appreciate that in people I'm about to kill." He gestured around the mill. "Atmospheric, isn't it? This place has seen a lot of death over the years. Tree cutters, mill workers who got careless around the machinery. A few more bodies won't raise any eyebrows." Marcus forced himself to remain calm, knowing that Luna was picking up on his emotional state. "You have, Sarah. Here's Luna. Let's make the exchange and end this." Emerson laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Oh, Mr. Sullivan, you still don't understand, do you? There is no exchange. You've seen too much, know too much. All of you." His gaze swept over Jake, Ellie, and the Marines who'd accompanied them. "The only question is whether you die quickly or slowly." That's when the first shot rang out, but it didn't come from Emerson's gun. Jake had spotted movement in the shadows, armed men positioned throughout the mill, at least 6 of them. The Marines reacted instantly, their training kicking in as they dove for cover behind old machinery and began returning fire. In the chaos that followed, Marcus saw his chance. He sprinted toward Sarah while Luna, showing incredible intelligence, circled wide to flank Emerson's position, but Emerson was ready for them. As Marcus reached Sarah and began untying her restraints, Emerson appeared behind them with his gun trained on Sarah's head. "Touching reunion," Emerson snarled. "Now watch her die." Before Emerson could pull the trigger, Luna charged. Her massive form crashed into Emerson like a freight train, sending him flying into a stack of lumber. But even as she saved Sarah's life, Marcus realized with horror that Luna had been hit by gunfire from one of Emerson's men. Dark blood was spreading across her shoulder, and she was favoring her left front leg. "Luna!" Marcus shouted, but there was no time to help her. More gunfire erupted as Emerson's men closed in, and Marcus found himself dragging Sarah toward what little cover they could find while bullets whined overhead. Sarah, her mouth finally free of the tape, grabbed Marcus's arm. "There are others," she gasped. "In the basement. Kids, Marcus. He's got kids down there." Marcus felt his world tilt. Not only were Emma and other victims being held at the Elm Street facility, but Emerson had more prisoners right here. The scope of the man's operation was even worse than they'd imagined. Ellie, despite her age, had found cover behind an old conveyor belt and was using her late husband's revolver with deadly accuracy. "Marcus," she called out, "Luna's trying to tell you something." Despite her wound, Luna was pawing at a section of the floor near the far wall, the same desperate scratching motion she'd used to draw numbers in the dirt. Marcus realized she was indicating a trap door, access to the basement where Sarah said the other victims were being held. But reaching that door meant crossing 30 feet of open ground under heavy fire. It was suicide, and Marcus knew it. That's when Tom Reeves made the decision that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. "Cover me!" the Marine shouted. And before anyone could stop him, he was running toward the trapdoor, drawing fire away from Marcus and Sarah. He made it halfway before the bullets found him, but his sacrifice gave Marcus the opening he needed. Marcus reached the trapdoor as Tom hit the ground, his Marine tattoos now stained with blood. Below, Marcus could hear voices, young voices, crying and calling for help. The basement was Emerson's holding facility, and God only knew how many victims were trapped down there. Luna, still bleeding but refusing to give up, positioned herself over the trapdoor like a guardian. When one of Emerson's men tried to approach, she reared up on her hind legs despite her wound, all 800 pounds of her fury focused on protecting the entrance to where the victims were held. That's when Marcus heard the sound that changed everything. Helicopters approaching. Jake's federal contacts had finally responded, but they were too late to save Tom, and Marcus wasn't sure they'd be in time to save anyone else. Emerson, realizing his operation was collapsing, made one final desperate play. He appeared from behind a pile of lumber, his gun aimed not at Marcus or Sarah, but at Luna. "You want to be a hero, Sullivan? Choose. I can kill the bear, or I can throw a grenade down that basement and kill all the kids. Your call." Luna looked at Marcus with those intelligent eyes, and in that moment he understood what she was trying to tell him. She'd been tortured, abused, and nearly killed. But she was willing to die to protect the innocent victims below. She was asking him to let her make that sacrifice. "No," Marcus said quietly, then louder. "No. There's another choice." Before Emerson could react, Marcus did something that went against every instinct he had. He opened the trap door and jumped into the basement, landing hard among a group of terrified teenagers who'd been chained to the walls. Emma was there, just as he'd suspected, along with 4 other kids who looked like they'd been held captive for months. From above, he could hear Luna's roar of fury as she realized what he'd done. Marcus had made himself a hostage, betting that Emerson needed him alive as leverage against the approaching federal agents. "Emma!" Marcus called out, recognizing the girl from the dark web videos. "Luna led me to you. She's been trying to save you." Emma, 16 years old but looking much older after months of captivity, stared at Marcus with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Luna's alive? She escaped?" "She's upstairs and she's hurt, but she's fighting to protect all of you." Marcus began working on the chains that held the teenagers. "What can you tell me about this place?" "How many others are there?" "Just us now," Emma replied, tears streaming down her face. "There were more, but when animals escaped or got sick, he made examples of some of the kids who tried to help them." The full horror of what Marcus had stumbled into was becoming clear. This wasn't just animal trafficking, it was human trafficking as well. Emerson had been using kidnapped teenagers to train and care for the animals, disposing of both kids and animals when they became inconvenient. Above them, the sound of gunfire was diminishing, replaced by the authoritative voices of federal agents taking control of the scene. But Marcus could also hear something else: Luna's labored breathing. She was weakening from blood loss, and time was running out. That's when Emma said something that broke Marcus's heart. "Is Luna going to be okay? She used to sleep by my cage to keep me warm when I was scared." "She's the only reason I survived in here." Marcus realized that Luna's protective instincts hadn't developed overnight. She'd been caring for Emma and the other victims for months, forming bonds that transcended species. Her desperate attempts to communicate, her drawings of the number 23, her computer skills, all of it had been her trying to lead rescuers back to save the people she'd been forced to leave behind. As federal agents finally breached the basement and began freeing the teenagers, Marcus climbed back up to find Luna collapsed near the trapdoor, her massive body still positioned protectively, even as her strength faded. Sarah was kneeling beside her, tears streaming down her face as she whispered words of comfort to the dying bear. Emerson was in federal custody, his operation dismantled, and the victims were being rescued, but the cost had been devastating. Tom Reeves was dead, Luna was dying, and Marcus realized that nothing would ever be the same again. As he knelt beside Luna, she lifted her head weakly and looked at him one last time. In her eyes, he saw not accusation or regret, but something that looked remarkably like gratitude. She had completed her mission. The victims were safe, the monster was captured, and the truth was finally revealed. Marcus placed his hand on Luna's massive head and whispered, "You did it, girl. You saved them all." What happened next defied every expectation Marcus had about endings. As Luna lay bleeding on the sawmill floor, her breathing shallow and labored, Emma broke free from the federal agents who were trying to escort her to safety. The 16-year-old girl, despite months of captivity and trauma, knelt beside the massive bear and began speaking in a voice so gentle it made everyone stop what they were doing. "Hey, beautiful girl," Emma whispered, her small hands stroking Luna's fur with practiced familiarity. "Remember what I taught you about being strong? Remember how you used to keep me warm when the nightmares came?" Luna's eyes focused on Emma's face, and something miraculous happened. Her breathing steadied, and she made a soft, chuffing sound that was unmistakably recognition and love. The federal veterinarian who'd arrived with the rescue team, Dr. Sarah Martinez, quickly assessed Luna's wounds with growing amazement. "This is incredible," she told Marcus. "The bullet missed all vital organs, and while she's lost blood, it's not as severe as it initially appeared. Bears are remarkably resilient, and this one seems to have something extraordinary to live for." As Luna was carefully transported to the emergency veterinary clinic in Kalispell, Marcus rode in the ambulance with Sarah, holding her hand while she processed everything that had happened. "I watched her fight for us," Sarah said quietly, her free hand resting on her pregnant belly. "That bear, Luna, she knew exactly who the real monsters were. She could have run, could have saved herself, but she stayed to protect people she barely knew." "She stayed to protect Emma and the others," Marcus corrected gently. "I think she was never trying to escape for herself. She was trying to find help for them." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Like someone else I know. Someone who couldn't walk away from a dying animal even when it cost him everything." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I was so focused on feeling abandoned that I couldn't see you were actually becoming the man I fell in love with. Someone who'd risk everything for those who couldn't save themselves." The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of revelations that kept expanding the scope of Emerson's crimes. FBI investigations revealed that his trafficking network spanned 15 states and had been operating for over 5 years. The accidents and disappearances of exotic animals weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a systematic cover-up of a business that generated over $3 million annually in illegal animal sales. More shocking was the discovery of Emerson's real motivation. Agent Jennifer Walsh, who was leading the federal investigation, explained it to Marcus during one of many debriefing sessions. Richard Emerson's daughter Emma didn't die in a bear attack as he claimed. She died in his own breeding facility when he tried to use her to train a bear cub for private sale. The animal attacked her, and instead of getting her immediate medical attention, he tried to cover up what had happened. She bled to death because he was more concerned about protecting his business than saving his child. The irony was devastating. Emerson had been trying to recapture Luna not just to eliminate evidence, but because she was the same species that had killed his daughter. His entire operation had become a twisted form of revenge against the animals he blamed for his own negligence and greed. Emma, the Emma who'd been held captive, turned out to be a different girl entirely, kidnapped from a foster home in Oregon 18 months earlier. Her real name was Emma Hartwell, and her reunion with her foster parents was tearful and healing in ways that reminded everyone why they'd fought so hard to save her. But perhaps the most surprising revelation came when Jake's investigation uncovered the truth about Luna's origins. She hadn't been born in captivity as they'd assumed. Luna was actually from Yellowstone National Park, part of a bear family that had been captured illegally when she was just a few months old. Her mother and siblings had been killed, but Luna had survived and been sold into Emerson's network. "She's not just any bear," Jake explained to Marcus as they sat in the veterinary clinic waiting room while Luna underwent surgery to remove the bullet fragments. According to park records, her mother was known as Bear 409, one of the most intelligent and gentle bears ever documented in Yellowstone. Luna inherited those traits, which is why she was so valuable to Emerson and why she was able to form such strong bonds with the human victims. This discovery meant that Luna, if she survived and recovered, could potentially be returned to Yellowstone National Park, back to the wild home she'd been stolen from as a cub. It was what Marcus had always said he wanted for her, but now that the possibility was real, he found himself struggling with the idea of letting her go. Ellie, who had become Luna's most devoted advocate during her recovery, understood Marcus's conflict better than anyone. "Honey," she said, as they watched Luna through the window of her recovery enclosure, "love isn't about keeping something close to you. It's about wanting what's best for them, even when it breaks your heart." Luna's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Within 2 weeks, she was walking without favoring her injured leg. Within a month, she was showing all the signs of a healthy young bear ready to return to the wild, but more importantly, she was showing signs of healing from her psychological trauma. Dr. Martinez documented Luna's progress with growing amazement. "I've never seen anything like this," she told Marcus. "Most animals that have been in captivity for extended periods show permanent behavioral changes, fear responses, inability to socialize with their own species, overdependence on humans. Luna shows none of those symptoms. It's as if she always knew she was meant to be wild." The answer to Luna's resilience came from Emma Hartwell herself. During one of her therapy sessions, she revealed the secret of how she and Luna had survived their captivity. "I used to tell her stories," Emma explained, "stories about the mountains and the forests, about running free and swimming in clear streams. I told her she was a wild bear who was just visiting the human world and someday she'd go home. I think she believed me." Emma's therapy with Luna became a crucial part of both their healing processes. The girl who'd been held captive for 18 months and the bear who'd been tortured for years found comfort in each other's presence. Watching them together, Marcus understood something profound about the nature of survival and resilience. 3 months after the rescue, Marcus received news that would change everything one final time. The Yellowstone National Park Service, in cooperation with several wildlife organizations, was establishing a new program, the Luna Memorial Wildlife Sanctuary. Named in honor of Luna's courage and the victims she'd helped save, it would serve as both a research facility for animal behavior and a sanctuary for rescued wildlife that couldn't be returned to the wild. But the most surprising part of the announcement was the job offer that came with it. Marcus was invited to serve as the sanctuary's first director, a position that would allow him to work with rescued animals while contributing to legitimate wildlife research. The salary was more than he'd ever made as a park ranger, and it came with full benefits for his growing family. Sarah was the one who convinced him to accept. "You've spent your whole adult life feeling guilty about the animals you couldn't save overseas," she told him. "Maybe it's time to focus on all the ones you can save going forward." The sanctuary was built on land donated by Marcus's own family, a stunning revelation that came when his estranged father called for the first time in 5 years. "I saw what you did on the news," the elder Sullivan said during their awkward phone conversation. "Your mother and we're proud of you. We have some land in Montana that's been sitting empty. Maybe it's time it was used for something meaningful." 6 months after Luna's rescue, the sanctuary officially opened with Luna as its first resident. The plan was still to return her to Yellowstone eventually, but first she would help other rescued animals learn to trust again. Emma Hartwell, now recovered and thriving in a loving adoptive family, visited regularly to help with Luna's continued rehabilitation. On the day of the sanctuary's grand opening, Marcus stood with Sarah, now visibly pregnant and glowing with health, watching Luna interact with a group of rescued wolf cubs that had been found abandoned in the wild. Luna's maternal instincts had emerged strongly during her recovery, and she seemed to understand instinctively that these smaller animals needed her protection and guidance. Ellie, now the sanctuary's volunteer coordinator, joined them at the observation fence. "You know what I love most about this story?" she said, watching Luna gently nose one of the wolf cubs back toward the group when it wandered too far. "It started with a man who couldn't walk away from something that was dying, and it ended with something that brings life to everything it touches." As if hearing her words, Luna looked up and made direct eye contact with Marcus. For just a moment he could swear he saw gratitude in her expression, not just for being saved, but for being allowed to save others in return. And in that moment, Marcus understood that sometimes the most broken among us have the most to teach about healing, and sometimes reaching out to save another soul is really about saving your own. Love doesn't ask for anything in return. It just asks to be shared. And in sharing it, we all find our way home. Sometimes the most profound moments in life come when we're faced with an impossible choice between what's safe and what's right. Marcus Sullivan's story reminds us that at any age, we still have the power to make decisions that define who we truly are. When he saw Luna dying by that roadside, he could have driven past. After all, he had his own problems, his own family to worry about. But something inside him, that same something that lives in all of us, couldn't turn away from suffering. As we navigate our golden years, we often wonder if our lives have made a difference, if the choices we've made have mattered. Marcus discovered that it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be, and that sometimes our greatest challenges become our most meaningful victories. Luna didn't just need saving, she needed someone who wouldn't give up on her, just like we all need people who won't give up on us. The beautiful truth is that when we reach out to help others, we often find we're the ones being saved. Every day presents us with small opportunities to choose compassion over convenience, love over fear. And what moment in your life taught you the most about the power of not giving up? Have you ever found that helping someone else actually helped heal something inside yourself? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you found meaning through helping others.